The rain in New York City doesn't fall, it attacks. It's a spiteful, horizontal mist that seems less like weather and more like the city itself sweating out its own grime and exhaustion, a cold sweat of asphalt, pigeon droppings, and forgotten promises. It was this kind of rain that found Leo, a bike messenger with a busted phone, a landlord's final notice burning a hole in his pocket, and a sinking feeling in his gut that had nothing to do with the weather. He was huddled under the thin, greasy awning of a bodega somewhere on the fringes of Chinatown, watching the water cascade off its sagging canvas in a miserable, continuous stream. The address on his damp waybill was smudged, the ink bleeding into the cheap paper from the afternoon's relentless downpour. The name of the recipient was nothing but a waterlogged blue smear. All he could make out was the cross street, Orchard, just a block over, and a suite number that didn't make any sense. 6 feet, 102. Ain't no half suites, man, he muttered to himself. His voice a low rumble swallowed by the hiss of tires on wet asphalt in the distant, mournful wail of a siren. His delivery, a small, unnervingly heavy lockbox, sealed with dark red wax and bound in tarnished brass straps, was hours overdue. Every other messenger service he'd called from the bodega's payphone, Relic itself, sticky and smelling of old coins, had laughed, their dispatchers' voices crackling with static and a kind of weary disdain. Orchard and Hester? That old textile building? The Amsel Building? Yeah, good luck with that, pal. We don't go there! Nobody's been in or out of that place in years. Not for long, anyway. But Leo needed the money. The kind of need that is a cold, hard knot in your stomach. The kind that makes you ignore the primal prickle on the back of your neck. The whispered warnings that sound an awful lot like common sense. It was the kind of need that made him step out into that spiteful rain, the lockbox a lead weight in his messenger bag, and push through the heavy, scarred oak door of 87 Orchard Street. The change was immediate and absolute. The cacophony of the city, the honking, the shouting, the relentless beat of urban life was snipped off as if by a pair of giant shears. The silence that replaced it was thick, heavy, a physical presence that pressed in on his eardrums. The air inside was another thing entirely. It was old dust, the ghost of mothballs and cheap floral perfume, and underneath it all, a sweet, coppery tang that made his teeth ache and his stomach do a slow, uneasy roll. It was the smell of a penny, held on the tongue, and the smell of something left to spoil in a closed drawer. The lobby was a tomb of faded Art Deco grandeur, a beautiful corpse left to rot. The black and white marble floor was cracked and veined with grime. The pattern now a dizzying mess of imperfections. The wall of mailboxes was a mosaic of tarnished brass and shattered glass. The names within faded to illegible ghosts. A single fly-specked bulb hung from a length of braided wire, casting a jaundiced, flickering light that seemed not to illuminate but to accuse, making the shadows in the corners seem deeper, more substantive. There was no doorman, no directory, no sign of life whatsoever. Just a wide, curving staircase sweeping up into the gloom, its banisters carved into strange, twisting shapes that looked less like woodwork and more like petrified tentacles, their polished surfaces worn smooth by hands long gone. The elevator, a gilded cage of rust and neglect, stood open, its gate ajar. Its shaft was a dark, hungry mouth exhaling a breath of ozone and decay. A hand-scrawled sign on cardstock, browned with age, dangled from the gate by a piece of string, out of order, since 1928. Just perfect, Leo breathed, his voice a hollow echo in the oppressive silence, too loud, too alive. He shook the rain from his worn leather jacket, the water droplets hitting the filthy floor with sounds like tiny gunshots. He hitched his messenger bag higher on his shoulder, feeling the strange weight of the lockbox settle against his hip, and started up the stairs. The steps groaned under his weight, a sound of profound weariness, of bones complaining after a long sleep. The wallpaper, once a rich, embossed velvet, was peeling away in great limp strips, revealing layers of older patterns beneath, gaudy florals, sinister-looking black geometries, and something that looked disturbingly like flesh-toned damask. He could have sworn the patterns shifted slightly in his peripheral vision, the curls of vine tightening, the geometries realigning into sharper, more alarming angles. He kept his eyes fixed straight ahead. He passed the second floor, the third. Each landing was a carbon copy of the last, a long, dark hallway receding into a pool of absolute blackness. Doors spaced at irregular intervals, some numbered with tarnished brass digits, some not. All of them closed tight. The air grew thicker, warmer, harder to breathe. The sweet copper smell was stronger here, a cloying perfume now mixed with the scent of old. Crumbling books and something else, something organic and wrong like an overripe, rotting melon left in a sunless room. On the fourth-floor landing, he stopped. The number on the wall was scratched out with deep, furious gouges, but he could just make out the shape of the numeral beneath the damage 4. This was it. The hallway seemed longer here, the darkness at its end more complete. He walked slowly, his boots making no sound on the threadbare, floral-patterned runner that was stained with patches of ominous, dark discoloration. The doors here were different. They were heavier, older, made of a dark, almost black wood, and each was fitted with a large, tarnished silver knocker in the shape of a leering, demonic face, its mouth open in a silent scream. Suite 614 was at the very end of the hall, a massive door of black oak. Next to it, almost hidden in a deep alcove of shadow, was another door. It was narrower, lower, and bore no number. Just a single symbol carved deep into the wood grain, a spiral that seemed to shift and writhe if he looked at it too long, pulling at his vision, pulling at his thoughts. This had to be 61412. He hesitated, his knuckles an inch from the strange wood. The silence was absolute. He could hear the blood rushing in his own ears, a frantic living sound in this dead place. He could hear the slow, rhythmic drip of water from somewhere deep within the walls. He knocked. The sound was wrong. It wasn't the solid thump of fist on wood. It was a hollow, wet sound, a squelch, as if he'd knocked on something soft, something that gave way unpleasantly. There was no answer from within. He tried again, louder, his own fear making him impatient. This time, the door swung inward without a sound, moving on hinges that were perfectly silent. The room beyond was a wall of pitch black, a darkness so complete it felt solid. "Hello?" Leo called out, his voice tight and thin. "Delivery for this address. Anyone home?" The formality of the words sounded absurd in the swallowing quiet. A smell wafted out from the darkness, and it made his eyes water and his gorge rise. It was the smell from the hallway, but 1,000 times concentrated. Rotting fruit, spoiled meat, the cloying sweetness of decay, and that thick metallic tang. And underneath it all, the dry, ancient scent of papyrus and dust of a tomb newly opened. A figure emerged from the blackness, gliding rather than walking. It was a man or something that had adopted the shape of a man. He was painfully thin, cadaverous, draped in a dressing, gown that might have been exquisite. Silk once, but was now stained and shiny with age. The pattern faded to a vague, unsettling blur. His skin was the color and texture of old parchment, pulled taut over a skull that seemed too angular, the cheekbones too sharp, the jaw too long. It was a face that refused to settle into a known geometry, but it was his eyes that held Leo, that froze the blood in his veins. They were huge, liquid black pools that reflected no light, gave back nothing of the world. They were the eyes of a creature from a lightless abyss, things that had never seen the sun and had no need for it. "You have it," the man said. His voice was a dry rustle, like pages turning in a forgotten library, like the scuttling of insects inside a wall. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. "Yeah, I need a signature." Leo's voice was a humiliating squeak. He fumbled with the flap of his messenger bag, his fingers suddenly clumsy, and pulled out the heavy lockbox. He held it out, suddenly desperate to be rid of its unsettling weight, to be free of this place and this person. A long-fingered hand, its skin like cracked leather, its nails yellow and cruelly curved like talons, emerged from the voluminous sleeve and took the box. The man's touch was cold and dry, like a bundle of ancient twigs brushed against his skin. He didn't look at the box. Those vast black eyes remained fixed on Leo, unblinking. "The compensation," the man rustled. He gestured with a skeletal hand toward the impenetrable interior of the room. "Within, come." Every instinct in Leo's body, every primal nerve ending, screamed at him to run, to drop the box, turn and sprint down those groaning stairs, burst out into the rain and the noise and the life of the city and never, ever look back. But that other need, the cold, hard need represented by the final notice in his pocket. The need that had him riding through freezing rain for 12 hours a day, pinned his feet to the floor. The payout for this delivery was triple the usual. Rate. Triple. It was the difference between another month and a packed suitcase. He took a hesitant step over the threshold. The door swung shut behind him with a soft, final click that echoed in the profound silence. The darkness was absolute for a moment, a suffocating velvet blanket. Then, the man struck a match. The sudden flare of light was blinding, and in its brief, sulfurous glow, Leo caught a glimpse of the space. It was vast, far larger than any apartment had a right to be. The ceiling was lost in darkness high above. The match touched the wick of a single, black candle on a small, ornate table, and the candlelight sputtered to life. The light did not push the darkness back. It merely carved a tiny, fragile island of visibility out of the overwhelming, hungry night. Leo could see the table was covered in strange, unsettling instruments of tarnished silver and polished obsidian, scalpels, probes, things with cruel-looking clamps and delicate needles. And he could see the walls. They were not walls. They were shelves, floor to the invisible ceiling, an endless library of horror. And the shelves were crammed with jars. Glass jars of all shapes and sizes, filled with a murky, yellowish fluid that seemed to glow faintly in the candlelight. And floating in the fluid were things that made Leo's breath catch in his throat, that sent a cold spike of pure terror straight into his heart. An eye, wide and staring, its iris a strange phosphorescent green, trailing a bundle of pale nerves like a morbid puppet string. A hand, small and perfectly preserved. A woman's hand, its fingers curled in a delicate, unnatural gesture as if caught in the act of casting a spell. A cluster of teeth, but they were too long, too sharp, like the fangs of some unknown predator. A human heart suspended, still and dark, an intricate web of black veins spidering across its surface, and things he couldn't identify. Biological absurdities that twisted his mind trying to comprehend them. A knot of writhing tendrils, a single, giant organ pulsing slowly, a shape that seemed to be all mouth and no other feature. "My collection," the rustling voice said. The man was beside him, so close Leo could smell the ancient dust on his breath, could see the fine cracks webbing his papery skin. A lifetime's work. A taxonomist requires his specimens. A curator must curate. What are they?" Leo whispered, the words ash in his dry mouth. "The neighbors," the man said, and let out a sound that might have been a laugh, a dry, rattling exhalation like dead leaves skittering on concrete. "The previous tenants. The noisy ones, the curious ones, the ones who did not pay their rent. The city is so full of life, so much exquisite raw material. It is a sin against nature to be so wasteful. I merely preserve. I categorize. I appreciate." He picked up a large jar, something with too many jointed limbs, and a single, weeping, milky blue eye floated within. This one was a noise complaint, always with the music. Late into the night, Brahms, dreadful. He set it down with a soft click and picked up another. This one held a swirling, smoky substance that seemed to press against the glass with a faint, desperate keening, forming and reforming a shrieking face. This one was a landlord, very rude about the state of the building, very intrusive. Leo backed away, his heart hammering a frantic, runaway rhythm against his ribs. "I just want my money, man. Just give me the cash and I'll go. I won't say anything." "I didn't see anything." "The compensation," the man repeated, his black eyes gleaming in the candlelight, holding Leo's gaze. "Of course, it is here. All of it." He pointed a bony, accusing finger toward the back of the vast, jar-filled space. Leo squinted, peering into the gloom beyond the candle's feeble reach. He saw another door, even lower and narrower than the first. It was made of a dark, polished wood that seemed to drink the light, and set into its center was a single, large, blood-red gemstone that seemed to pulse with a faint, rhythmic inner light like a sleeping heart. "Through there," the man whispered, his voice a hypnotic rustle. "Your payment awaits. A fortune. More than you were promised. More than you could ever spend. It is yours for the taking. No one will ever trouble you again. Take it, it is yours." It was a trap. It was the most obvious glaring trap that had ever been set. Every fairy tale, every horror movie, every gut instinct screamed it. But a strange lethargy was seeping into Leo's limbs, a heavy warmth. The sweet, coppery smell was filling his head, making his thoughts slow and syrupy, drowning out the panic. The man's black eyes were deep, placid lakes pulling him in, promising him rest, an end to the grinding struggle, an end to the rain and the fear and the constant gnawing need. Just through the door! Just take what's yours. It's so easy. He found himself walking. The floor beneath his feet felt soft, spongy, giving slightly with each step, like walking on packed earth or something worse. The jars watched him pass, their silent, grotesque contents seeming to track his progress. The skittering sounds he'd heard before grew louder, keeping pace with him in the impenetrable dark beyond the candle's tiny island, a sinister escort. He reached the door. The red gemstone throbbed in time with his own frantic heartbeat. There was no handle, no knob, no keyhole. How does it open? Leo asked, his voice slurred, his tongue thick and clumsy. It opens inward, the rustling voice came from right behind him, though he hadn't heard the man move across the room. You simply have to push. Leo placed his hands on the cool, unnervingly smooth wood. It felt warm. He pushed. The door did not swing open. It unfolded. It was like pushing on the membrane of a giant living thing. It gave way with a soft, wet tearing sound, and a wave of air rushed out over him. It was warm, damp, and smelled of salt and minerals and something profoundly ancient, like the air at the bottom of the deepest ocean trench, air that had been locked away for eons. The room beyond was not a room. It was a throat. The walls were pulsating, ridged muscle glistening with a faint, bioluminescent slime that provided the only light, a sickly, reddish glow. The floor sloped downward into a terrifying, warm darkness, and the air vibrated with a deep, subsonic hum that shook Leo's bones and resonated in the fillings of his teeth. The pulsing red light was everywhere, emanating from the very tissue of the place, and the payment was there. Heaped in great, glittering piles were coins of gold and silver from forgotten currencies, gemstones the size of his fist, jewelry of impossible craftsmanship, gold chains, tiaras, scepters. It was a king's ransom, a pirate's treasure, scattered carelessly across the living, breathing, undulating floor. The rational part of Leo's mind, the part that had been screaming since he first pushed open the street-level door, finally shattered into a million pieces. He turned to run, to fight, to do anything, but the doorway was gone. The wall of jars, the table, the candle, the parchment-skinned man, all had vanished. There was only the pulsing, fleshy tunnel, stretching away into the reddish gloom in both directions, a closed loop of nightmare. From the darkness below, the abyss at the bottom of the slope, came a sound. A slow, colossal, dragging sound. Something immense, something heavy and soft and patient, was coming up the throat. Leo stumbled backward, his feet slipping on the slimy, organic floor. He fell hard, his hands plunging into a pile of cold coins and something else, something soft and yielding. He looked down, his vision blurring with terror. Among the treasure were bones. Human bones picked clean and gleaming white, and newer things, still clad in rotting cloth, a messenger's jacket not unlike his own, a pair of sneakers, the remains of a purse. The dragging sound grew louder, a seismic shifting. The humming intensified, becoming a deafening, mind-numbing drone that filled his skull, pushing out all thought, all hope. The walls constricted rhythmically, a peristaltic pulse that pushed him toward the abyss. He saw it then, emerging from the deep darkness. It was not a shape that could be described, only felt on a level deeper than sight. It was a mass of shifting, impossible geometry, all pallid, soft flesh and glistening, chitinous edges and 1,000 glistening, black eyes that opened and closed like starbursts. It was the source of the hum, the source of the hunger that saturated the very air. It was the building's true landlord, its heart and its stomach. It was the thing that collected the rent, a tendril, slick and featureless and strong as steel cable, shot out from the central mass and wrapped around his ankle. It was cold, colder than anything he had ever felt, a cold that burned like dry ice. It began to pull him down slowly, inexorably, its strength absolute. Leo screamed, but the sound was swallowed whole by the humming, by the wet, sucking sounds of the tunnel. He clawed at the fleshy floor, his fingers finding no purchase, only slick, yielding tissue. He was dragged, feet first, toward the central mass of the thing. The black eyes, thousands of them, swiveled to regard him. They held no malice, no anger, no cruelty, only a vast, infinite, and indifferent hunger. The hunger of a universe that is always, always empty. The last thing Leo saw before the warm, welcoming darkness took him completely was a glimpse of the parchment-skinned man, standing at the edge of the tunnel where the door had been. He was holding a large, empty glass jar, a label ready in his other hand. His face was a mask of serene, professional anticipation. He was waiting for the newest specimen for his collection, waiting to curate. The rain continued to fall on Orchard Street, washing the grime from the windows of 87 Orchard, but the darkness within remained untouched, a stain on the city's soul. In the lobby, the single bulb flickered once, twice, and died, plunging the place into a darkness that had stood for a century and would stand for a century more. A young woman, her phone held up against the relentless rain, paused under the awning of the bodega across the street. She checked her screen, frustration on her face. Her delivery app was glitching, the map spinning uncontrollably. The address for her next pickup was blinking, unstable. 87 Orchard Street, Suite 61412. The payout was astonishingly, suspiciously high for such a short trip. It was more than she made in a week. She looked up at the old building, its facade grim and silent, a black tooth in the mouth of the city. For a moment, she thought she saw a light flicker in a fourth-floor window, a faint, reddish pulse, like a single blinking eye. It was gone in an instant, probably just a reflection, a trick of the rain and the tired, streetlight-polluted night. She shook her head, shrugged her backpack higher on her shoulder. It was probably a scam, a glitch. But what if it wasn't? That kind of money? It could change everything. It could pay off the medical bill. It could get her little sister those shoes she wanted. The city had to eat, after all, and everyone had to pay their rent. She took a deep breath, stepped out into the rain, and reached for the heavy, scarred door.